Having covered the Middle East out of JP Morgan as their chief economist for MENA, I, of course, covered the crisis between Israel and Hezbollah during 2006. Went back to the American University of Beirut to pick up some books after that crisis, and had the pleasure of being able to say hello to our janitor who used to clean my office when I was there full-time. And I asked him whether he'd fought in South Lebanon with Hezbollah during the crisis. He said, no, I didn't fight, but my family did, and a couple of them died, unfortunately. I said, how is it that you didn't fight? He said, well, you know, I have a job here, and if I stay in this job, my children can study here for free, and they can become your students one day, and I hope you'll come back. And so all of these points mark, in many ways, what's going on in the Middle East. And today there's a great transformation taking place in the Middle East. The question is how far it'll go and what needs to be done for it to arrive at something meaningful. So before I discuss that, I want to share with you the basic premise that drives much of our research and much of our thinking on the Middle East today. Having covered that part of the world from a university classroom, working with students, from a trading floor at JP Morgan, as a young consultant here at the World Bank, trying to do public sector reform work, I am now having had the opportunity to work on Latin America at the World Bank in Spanish 15 years before all of this started in the Middle East. I'm now convinced that we are observing the emergence of a new emerging market in the Middle East. And my most interesting areas of research today are how the Middle East compares to those emerging markets that were trying to come up 20 and 15 years ago before we saw the BRICS emerge and before Brazil became the darling of trading floors, etc. And we have a few comparisons that I'll show you, but we compare pretty well to those emerging markets when they were emerging. And if things get done right in the Middle East, I think we will observe the next emerging market come out of all the growth pains that we are very likely to see over the next few years in the region. So this new paradigm is going to be costly and nonlinear. And today, it looks like this. There are 5 categories of countries emerging in our part of the world. There's the group that's emerging on the back of a revolution. Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, and Algeria, I think, are very likely candidates in that area. And the question there is how to keep the wheels turning. And of course, it's music to my ears, what's come out about what the president's about to say, and what the Minister of Finance has already announced in Egypt in terms of the assistance that he thinks he's going to get from the international community. But the region will have to pitch in, and I'll talk about that in a second. The second group of countries that's emerging are a group of constitutional monarchies that are in the making. And this is reform that's going to be driven from above, Morocco, Jordan, possibly Bahrain. And I hope some of you have followed what's come out over the past few days regarding the expansion of the GCC, the invitation of Jordan, Morocco's somewhat awkward response to the surprise invitation. All of these are moves in the same direction if they are pursued in the right manner, and I'll talk about those again in a minute. We have a third category of countries, the ones undertaking home-paced reform. And the question is, what will the pace of this reform be? In many ways, economists have been telling these countries the same thing for about 10 years. And today the question is, how quickly can they jumpstart the effort to respond to a new social contract that is being demanded? What's going on in new social networks and the impact of that on the Middle East and youth in the Middle East is extremely important. We've started to do some research on that, and watching that going forward is going to be very, very important, because in many ways, the pace of reform in the region has taken on a life of its own that's outside the control and scope of governments. I'll show you this chart. You see the red hump up there. Much of this is intra-regional FDI. So the increase in FDI in the MENA region, about 50% of that was intra-regional. And that's where the most important message is today. The region never used to invest in other countries in the region. Now it's investing more, and the enabling conditions are there for money to flow across the region. One more very quickly that shows you, the numbers here aren't significant in and of themselves, but the quantum leap is very interesting. The numbers aren't significant because this agency doesn't see all the transactions, but the increase between 1995 and 2009 tells you a lot about Arab money flowing into Arab countries, while it didn't before. If we compare, sort of this is an apples to oranges comparison, the GCC, MENA to the emerging markets and BRICS on an income per capita basis, not taking into account the lag time I mentioned earlier in development. The region compares very well. And I think most importantly, we know that well, balance sheets look very solid, even in, today, if you compare the BRICS to the emerging markets in terms of current accounts. But also, we know we've always been capital exporters, so that's the easy part. And this is a comparison that's actually apples to apples, comparing the Arab countries to the emerging markets and the BRICS with a lag period of 10 to 15 years to the period when those markets were emerging properly. But we also have become capital importers. That's interesting. So we used to absorb very little capital. But now the Arab countries have more of an absorptive capacity. And that's on the back of reform efforts that have been good, insufficient, obviously, but on the right track in many countries, including Egypt, for example, more friendly private sector regimes, etc. So let me leave it there. I'd be very happy to get back to a discussion of any of these points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.